and welcome. We are live, our final virtually connecting session from DML conference, and we'll have Christian introduce the on-site folks first, and then we'll go to our virtual folks.
Well, hi everyone, I'm Christian from Hamburg, and with me is Remi Kalir, who better, was that right?
Yes, it's good to see you.
I feel like Waldorf and Stadler now. But you introduce yourself better than I did.
Sure. Again, my name is Remi Kalir. It's a pleasure to be hanging out with folks on this virtual connecting call. It's great to see some friends. We were hoping to have a few more folks on site. I just want to say a kind of hello from another individual who might have been joining us today, Nicole Pinker. Nicole is a colleague and dear friend from Northwestern University in Chicago. She and I have been working together this past year on a project called Mobile City Science, which is a great example of the kind of digital media and learning work that this conference is celebrating. Unfortunately, Nicole had to get to the airport, so she can't join us, but she says hello.
Yeah, and we're still waiting for Renee Hobbs, who was going to join us, but I think the panel went a bit over time, and she might join us later on.
Awesome, thanks. And let's start with Ken, and then Martina, and then Nate.
Good afternoon. So Ken Bauer, Associate Professor of Computing Science here at the Tecnológico de Monterrey, and just love doing virtually connecting. Glad to be here.
Sorry, my audio cut out right when you might have been asking me to introduce myself. Is that true?
Okay, good. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah. So
yeah, we can hear you now, Martina.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. I'm Martina, and I'm actually friends with Christian, but that's not the reason why I'm here. I work as a project manager for the Servicestelle Offene Hochschule Niedersachsen, which is a government-affiliated organization in Lower Saxony in Germany. So I'm based in Hanover, and I've got a huge interest in, yes, local patriotism here, the good one, that is. I've got a huge interest in open educational resource and everything connected with this. So I'm very happy to hang out with you and do a bit of virtually connecting now.
Okay, Nate, go ahead.
I'm not sure if my audio is coming through. How about a thumbs up? Excellent. I'm Nate Angel. I work for Hypothesis, the nonprofit that stewards and develops open source annotation technology that I'm sure will be mentioned again in this call. And I'm mostly here to hear all the good things that these guys have to say. And if anybody has any questions about Hypothesis that these folks don't know, maybe I can weigh in.
Awesome, thanks. And we'll see how Mark's audio is working. If not, then we'll move on. No audio from Mark, but Mark is here, and I believe he's based in California.
Good, and we have, drum roll, drum roll, drum roll.
Oh, stop it. Hello.
Yay. Hello. We meet again.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So glad you could make it to the Hangout.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
Can you do a quick introduction for those who are watching and those who are hanging out with you?
Absolutely. Okay, my name is Renee Hobbs. I'm a professor of communication studies at the University of Rhode Island, where I direct the Media Education Lab. And this is my 8th DML.
And you'll be playing a big part in next year's because it's in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, exactly. Now it'll just be a train ride away.
So you're getting close to the end of the conference. How are all the things, the pieces coming together for you?
Okay, so that's a really, thank you for asking. That's a great question, Helen. And I feel like it's probably important for the virtually connecting people to know that I have a complex love-hate relationship with DML. and I have for a long, long time. Okay, so when the group first came together, that was 8 years ago now, I was so enthusiastic and happy and, you know, proud and delighted. And of course, it felt like I found my people. It was terrific. But pretty early on in those first few years, I ran into the little bit of, I don't know, tension about the group's relentless optimism. And particularly its systematic avoidance of issues of political economy. Okay, for me, I have vivid memories of, you know, of course I'm raising my hand and asking questions and just feeling completely like this is not a group of people who wants to talk about the political economy of media systems or structures. This is not a group of people who wants to talk about media regulation or platform politics. This is a group of people that wants to celebrate how wonderful it is that we can all be connected.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so you might ask, why do I keep coming?
I was going to ask that, yeah.
Why do you keep coming, Renee?
Right. Well, of course, optimism and possibility is a powerful tool for building communities, right? And so I do feel that you kind of attract more flies with honey than with vinegar, as they say, right? And so I do feel that that's a really important part of the discourse, right? And so I appreciate that. I also feel like the unique characteristics of this year's DML is that it's like grad students all the way down, right? Okay, so like, you know, turtles all the way down, it's grad students all the way down. So this is a very young group. There aren't many old ladies like me in the room. There aren't many full professors in the room. It's grad students central here, which is really great because these people have not fully drank the Kool-Aid. They do not have the whole orthodoxy in place. They are actually more experimental and more questioning of some of our community's norms. So that's been great.
So what was the reaction then between, say, Dana Boyd's message yesterday and the Ezra's message, Henry's message today? Because there must have been like the flip side of the cube.
I do feel like that's exactly right, Helen. You have totally nailed it. It feels a little like whiplash. And it's also made me, of course, me reflect on that dialectic between empowerment and protection. And I really think it is a dialectic, right? We need empowerment perspectives and we need protection perspectives, and they actually both help each other. And I think Dana did a lot of good in reminding us. Used to be people like Henry and David Buckingham would say, shit on protectionism, that's terrible, it's moralizing, right? But we actually now recognize that both our love-hate relationship, living life on digital platforms, having our data be used to better propagandize us, right? And really recognizing some of the limitations of social media as tools for civic engagement are becoming really clear here. And I don't feel like the community, I think people are a little bit shell-shocked. Like, I feel like I've been waiting for this for years. So I'm really happy it's happening, but I feel like the community's a little bit shell-shocked, and it'll take time for us to process the implications of the turn that got made at this event.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yes. You go ahead, Remi.
Sorry, I guess I kind of read the conference in a very different way, which is interesting. I have to say I only have 6 years here at DML and not 8, so maybe I have less of a historical perspective than you. No, I guess keynotes in comparison to previous year's keynotes, were really light on learning. This may have just been a digital media conference and not the digital media and learning conference, which is fine because I actually don't care about the keynotes as much as I do the sessions and many of the other kinds of people and connections that are kind of happening here. I mean, it's not that I'm saying I don't care about them. I should say that I don't see them as a focal point in terms of organizing a community of practice. I think that what folks who are on this session might find really quite interesting is that there have been a number of academic communities that have been kind of playing in the same space for a number of years, including 2 other conferences, the Games Learning Society Conference, which I was pretty intimately involved with for 5 years as a co-chair of all of the education work related to that conference at the University of Wisconsin. And another kind of games and media oriented conference that was happening at MIT. The reason why I mention this is that this is the last DML conference. And so after this 8-year run, those 3 other conferences are going to come together in some kind of new hybrid synthesized format. And so if folks want to take a practical note, August 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 2018 at the MIT Media Lab will be the Connected Learning Summit. And it will basically be some amalgamation of DML and GLS. And I just blanked on the 3rd conference. It's Erica Klopfer and Scott
Education
Osterwiles.
Arcade.
It's the those folks. And their efforts, I guess, which is all to say that these conference spaces are, I think, very dynamic. I think that they all approach definitions of learning and criticality in different ways. And it will be interesting to see what emerges next August. So yeah, it's an interesting space to be in as this chapter comes to a close.
For me, maybe just to add to that, I always feel a bit like, first of all, I feel like the guppy. I already said that because it's my 2nd DML, and I'm just like, but more importantly, I have this, I at least perceive myself to have that role of just peeking in and peeking out again. So I was here last year. It's like the 2nd time I'm in the US, like since last year, and it's always beginning of October to visit DML, and it will be the last time now. But I think what this conference does better than most conferences that we have in Germany, for example, but also with exception maybe for the OER conferences, to contextualize the idea of digital media and learning with like larger topics, narratives, and ideas of society as a whole. And not only, and what I've found interesting here, and you could really see and notice it by the silence right at the beginning of the session with Henry Jenkins and Ezra, was that this notion of looking beyond of what it is that people are doing in the room, right? So there's a different context. So we had this before we started recording the session. This what struck me, and you could really hear that people were a bit struck by that notion, was that when Ezra said, I don't think of innovation as coming from the US anymore, and I'd include Europe in that, like in an instance. But I look at places where people undergo oppression, for example, and see, and I want to look at their practices to see what happens then. And I think we can learn a lot. And when it comes to, like, I mean, she built this LGBT platform, and it's supposedly troll-free, right? And that's something we can learn a lot from when we talk about like the learning management system or any other kind of learning environment that we build. And I think that was something that really worked well, and that lots of shades were removed, I think, in the last 2 hours. And you could see that, and you could notice that.
Yeah, and she was also, I think that's a very interesting point that you just made. And she was also very frank about the corrosive role of the philanthropies in making scholars and activists have to jump through their hoops about their topics and their passions. And I thought that was, at this conference in particular, with the elephant in the room that we cannot talk about, that was a courageous move in itself. So I thought that was quite intriguing, and I thought she was terrific. You know, my tension about, bring in I want to be mean about this, but bring in an activist and inspire us all to think great thoughts, is that also oversimplifies the complex reality that people in those communities face. And of course, I have a very personal connection to this, and I feel a lot like the civic action, the civic action and engagement folks that are part of this community sometimes are cheerleaders for something that's really actually really complicated and hard to do and risky. And so my question to Henry and Ezra was really about, do we tell enough stories about failure? Right? Do we tell enough stories? We always tell stories about success. It was a great story. She has a successful platform, woohoo. But we don't tell stories about failure. We don't tell stories about harm, and we don't tell stories about risk, because to do so would be such a downer, right? And since we're all doing this because we're advocates, we don't tell downer stories. But as scholars, you learn more from failure than success. I'm still trying to make sense of what happened to media literacy in Turkey. Right? Because it was actually supporting democratic engagement, and 350,000 children a year went through a media literacy class, right? And then the coup came, and the whole fucking thing turned around, right? And so I think we could probably learn a lot more from failure, but we have to be transparent, and that there's a tension there, and I feel that tension in an event like this, especially when it's speaking to educators. Right.
And I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah,
sorry.
I think
that was my fault.
I think that's this thing doesn't have the knobs.
Oh,
so the microphone picks
That's okay.
Sorry.
Just wanted to say, the challenge is how can you do digital and media learning without that activism and political participation?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the answer, of course, is yes, you can. I think maybe another question is, does that matter? Of course, we can give kids, Math Blaster and have them, learn multiplication facts. That's really great digital media learning. If we think that learning is arithmetic and disconnected from political contexts. So, I mean, my bias, of course, is to say that, yes, we technically can. I really appreciate Nate, who's on the call right now. He and I first met face-to-face last May at the Hypothesis conference I annotate. And I think that Nate was really helpful for me in my learning around the need to articulate these as finding kind of social and technical solutions to very complex human problems. And so, we can do digital media and learning as a technical solution to a kind of schooling problem, but that doesn't get very interesting very quickly, nor does it reflect maybe the ethics and values of being responsive to the current political moment. And I think that Nate, again, and I'm just speaking for myself here, was really helpful, I think, in talking about how certain communities and certain, maybe even technology platforms really do wrestle with finding socio-technical solutions to very complex human problems. And I do think that there are actually many people in the DML community in this space who are really wrestling with that. I think there are a lot of people here who are really attentive to and concerned with those types of questions and challenges, even if that sometimes means compromising because of money, or it means because you. Oh, I'm rambling, but in any case, that's part of the landscape too.
I'm going to give Martina a chance to jump in. She was writing something in the chat. I think she should bring up.
I think you're muted, Martina. Is that possible?
Yes. Okay, thanks. I think it's very interesting what you just said, Remi, and I found the spirit at the OER 17 conference in London to be completely different, in the sense that it was talked about that inherently everything that we're doing on a digital scale is actually political as well, starting with the fact that we're actually using the internet, and by using the internet, we're giving data to the internet that can be used for different purposes, some of which we might not subscribe to. We might not even know what they're going to do with this. So everything that we're actually doing is inherently political. And I think it's very interesting to see these sort of two different strands evolving there. And this is something that I put in the chat as well. What I observe in Germany is that we still have these different discourses. So some people are very much into open educational resources, and some people are very much into how can we enhance learning through to actually fostering digital literacies, etc., etc. And then all of a sudden, oh yes, there's this political aspect to this as well. Whereas I would argue that it's a cause of kind of common thread. It should go all the way along there. You can't separate one from the other. And I think this is something that we still lack in Germany, because this kind of political agenda, or different political agendas, are not always thought when creating learning experiences for the people, or when actually having this experience ourselves. And in that way, even though I highly appreciate people coming up with really sophisticated digital solutions for complex problems, I always tend to think, hey, yes, but there's also this political agenda. And so for me, the one can never be separated from the other.
Wow, Martina, thank you so much for sharing that really interesting point. You know, just last week I was in Germany at the Digi 17 conference in Cologne, and I also had a opportunity to feel a little bit of this complicated disconnects. I interpreted it as, you know, as an American, we don't have a Ministry of Education that tells us what to teach. And we have this complicated decentralized system, right? 15,000 school districts all making independent decisions to some extent, right? And I do feel like it seemed, what I got out of that conference was that teacher educators and ed schools in general felt that their contribution was to do rigorous exploration of innovation in order to bring the best ideas forward, and that in that community there was a lot of sensitivity to political economic context. I was surprised that Dana, I tweeted to Dana after her talk here. I said, you know, Dana, that was a great talk, but you were so oblique in referencing Facebook's the regulatory environment in Europe with the 50 billion euro, and you should have talked about hate speech, and you should have talked about platform regulation, and you should have said Facebook is a fucking media company, right? So that it could be regulated like a media company. So she seemed to like hold back on some obvious places where making the political economy connection would have been, I think, more powerful. And I wondered, geez, well, she's getting money from Microsoft, and you know, she's beholden to a certain set of interests here that want to keep the internet free. And so she can't say that. And I feel like that's the kind of dialogue I want to have. And I've never felt like I've been able to have that dialogue at DML in the 8 years. And I doubt I'll be able to have that dialogue at the new one. I doubt it. I doubt it. But I'll still come.
Yeah, that's what back channels are for, right?
So I'm very conscious and aware of the time, Christian. I know that there are things happening at your end. Do we have one more comment from you guys about your conference takeaway, and then maybe we'll let you go.
Yeah, I think Remi has to run pretty soon.
I have to run in a few minutes, but please go ahead.
I was just going to add to what you just said, that hold on. It's pretty difficult. I need a wider angle here. Yeah, or that. I was just going to add that, like, conferences like these and communities like these, and that goes back to like both your contributions, your comments, always there's always this risk of falling for techno-solutionism and for let's build another tool to solve a societal, political, educational problem. And I mean, we had that in our first session, I think on Wednesday. And what I think is what the session with Henry and Ezra did, but also what to a certain extent Dana Boyd's session did, was to critically ask if that is the right pathway. And I think that is something that I can definitely say is something that was stressed here more vigorously than at many other conferences along the way.
Sure.
I mean, you're the on-site guest. I should just.
Final comments. It's a pleasure to see everyone. I hope that everyone takes away a little bit of hope from some little bit of critique, but good purpose, and finding perhaps fellowship in the struggle of doing hard work. And maybe that's what we're here to do, is find fellowship in doing the work that counts.
Yeah, and virtually connecting rocks. Okay, you guys are awesome.
Thank you so
such
much
a
for taking time.
honor to be part of it's like a paratext, a para conversation, right? So I feel very lucky that we get to widen our discourse, and you guys are the best, and this whole enterprise is just, it's thrilling. So thanks for letting me be part of it.
Indeed. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you guys. Have a good day.